I was driving down the highway one night, headed home from working late at my job. I came across a young woman standing on the side of the road. I pulled up to her and asked her if she needed a ride, and she then nodded her head up and down and smiled at me. I opened my truck door and she hopped in. As we began driving down the road, I asked her where she was headed, and she told me to just go to the nearest town, which was about 20 minutes away. This girl looked young, maybe around 18 years old, and she did not talk the whole time. I decided to play some music, so I put my tape in the cassette player. After about 3 minutes of listening to music, I reached over to turn off the cassette player, but I accidentally hit the eject button, and the cassette tape fell onto the ground of the truck. She looked down at the cassette on the ground, and so did I, but I was driving at the same time. So, as I held on to the wheel with one hand, my other hand reached down to the ground to pick up the cassette. I was looking at the road, and every once in a while I had to look back down to the floor to grab the tape. The cassette tape was right next to her feet. As I looked at her feet, I was shocked to the core. What I saw to this day has petrified me. What I'm about to tell you is something that only the brave can handle. This girl had goat legs and goat feet. Her legs had fur and her feet were hooves. I was in shock and my eyes opened wide and I could feel my face go numb. I quickly looked at her and she was staring right at me. She knew that I saw her legs. I sat back up really quickly, and through the corner of my eye, I could see she was still staring at me. I couldn't stop shaking. She then started laughing. I can hear her laughing and giggling, yet through the corner of my eye, her mouth wasn't even moving. I slammed on the brakes and reached over quickly, grabbed the handle to the truck, and I opened the truck door. I lifted up my leg and I kicked her out. She flew out of the truck. I then slammed on the gas and took off. I was driving the truck well over 100 miles an hour down the highway. I looked over to my left out of the window and her face was looking right at me. She was flying and gliding right next to my truck window. How was this even possible, I thought. She was cursing and yelling. I could hear her screaming through the window. I drove even faster, and I don't know how fast I was going, but it must have been fast because she vanished. I made it to the nearest town. I got off and had to get my composure together. I was traumatized, and to this very day, I still am. When I was about 6 years old, we lived in a trailer in Rosenberg, Texas, and my mother would watch over me and my little sister while my dad went to work. One morning, my mom was making eggs in the kitchen while me and my sister were in my mom's room. My sister was asleep on my mom's bed while I was coloring in a coloring book. I was facing the wall standing up, and my sister was on the bed right behind me. I just remember feeling as if something was behind me, and I heard a small noise. So I turned around and I was shocked to the core and caught by surprise. There was a blue-looking girl around 12 or so staring right at me. She was slowly folding a blanket, looking right into my eyes. She had black, long hair and it looked wet. Also, it looked as if she was wearing a nightgown. This ghost-looking girl was inches away from my little sister who was asleep on the bed. I smiled and I said hi to her out of fear and waved at her. I slowly turned back around towards my coloring book, and deep inside I was petrified. I started coloring again, yet my mind was set on running out of that room. I was so afraid of this girl catching me while I was trying to run away. Yet, I counted down from 5. As soon as I got to 1, I took off out of the room screaming. My mother was in the kitchen and she turned towards me, wondering what happened. I explained everything to my mother. At first, she didn't believe me, but she eventually decided to go look in the room. She went into the room where I saw the girl, and nothing was there. Just my little sister sleeping on the bed. My mother told me to stay out of the room. After about 10 minutes, I then slowly walked up to the doorway and peeked into the room, and nothing was there. I then walked in and looked around the room, and to my shock and surprise, there was a wet spot right where the girl was standing. I looked towards my little sister, and there was a blanket on top of her. It was the same blanket that the ghost girl was folding.
Scary true story number 1, The Growl. What I'm about to tell you is 100% true. There is no reason or explanation for what occurred that dark night. Just to let you know, I'm a huge fan of the paranormal, and I love telling true paranormal ghost stories to my kids. In late 2022, me and my daughter Chelsea were home alone. It was around 2 in the morning, and we were both bored with not much to do. I brought up the idea to tell true ghost stories in the dark. She reluctantly agreed. We went into my bedroom, closed the door. I turned off the light, and even the fan, so it was extremely quiet. I laid on my bed, which was across the room from the door. My daughter sat on the floor at the foot of my bed. I decided to tell her a story that she has never heard before. A true scary story that even petrified me. I began to tell her the story. It was about a man that was in the hospital. He had just finished having surgery on his heart. While he was asleep, he dreamed of a little girl that gave him a teddy bear. She then spoke to him, telling him as long as he keeps the bear she gave him, he will never get sick again. He then woke up. When he looked around the room, he noticed there was a small teddy bear sitting next to him on the bed. His wife, who was sitting next to him, told him, "While you were sleeping, a little girl entered the room. She said she wanted to give you this small stuffed teddy bear. She then turned around and walked out of the room." Her husband couldn't believe what he was witnessing. The bear was the same exact bear that was given to him in his dream. He then asked his wife what the little girl looked like. As she began to explain details about the young girl, he started to feel nauseous and chills went through his feet to his head. It was the same girl he dreamed of. At this part of the story, my daughter jumped on the bed. I asked her what happened. She claimed she felt that someone was looking at her as if they were inches away from her face. I smiled and laughed a little. I then tried to figure out how the rest of the story went from that point on. There was a brief silence in the room. It was during this silence that something occurred nor me or my daughter would ever forget to this day, and it still haunts me to even think about it. In the midst of the silence, by the foot of my bed, we heard a kid's voice say, "Growl," as if trying to scare us. After hearing this, my daughter screamed the loudest death scream I have ever heard. I tried to keep my composure, thinking who else could it be in the room with us? No one else was home other than me and my daughter. That's when something climbed to the foot of the bed, making an indentation. At that point, we both felt the bed go down. That's when we both screamed. I pulled my legs up to my chest and scooted over to my daughter's side of the bed, screaming and hoping whatever it was wouldn't continue to crawl on top of us. At this point, my daughter was crying her eyes out. I myself was almost at that point. Not being able to see what it was only intensified the terror we both felt. Just then, as if sent by an angel, my wife and other daughter opened the door to the room, and light filled up the room. My daughter jumped over me and ran out of the room. My wife asked me what happened. I got up and walked around the bed, also looking under it as well, trying to find someone hiding or some explanation to what occurred moments before. I explained to my wife what we were doing and what happened. Sad to say, but since that night, I never ever told my daughter another scary, true paranormal ghost story. I spoke to some people who have knowledge of the paranormal, and what they told me gave me the creeps. They said, saying true stories about hauntings, demons, ghosts, or anything paranormal of that nature invites and brings in entities, whether you invite them or not. Be careful when telling scary stories. Even listening to them can invite them also. There could be one staring right at you this very moment. Scary paranormal story number 2. The Witch Neighbor. About 20 years ago, in 2006, in Rosenberg, Texas, I lived in an apartment with my wife. I was about 21 years old. We lived on the second floor with a balcony patio that we shared with our neighbor. Our neighbor came from New Orleans following Hurricane Katrina. She had been our neighbor for about 1 month. When she moved in, I would hear weird noises and sounds coming from her bedroom. I would put my ear against the wall, and then the noises would completely stop, as if something was staring at me. Many paranormal scary things started occurring when she moved in. There were many times I would be alone in the kitchen at night drinking a Coke, and the kitchen light would begin flickering. Things would randomly go missing. Car keys, wallets, and other important small items would be placed in other parts of the apartment. I only saw my neighbor one time. She was a black older lady, and she had a huge black hat on her head. We both were trying to open our doors to get into our apartments. I remember looking over at her when she walked in her apartment, and she had bags of groceries in her hands. I saw that she had a weird furry black bracelet on her wrist. At that exact moment, I remember feeling extremely scared and feeling like I was being watched. I quickly went inside, wondering, who is this woman? Even our pet bird that we had grew warts on her beak. I felt bad for her. She was a beautiful white parakeet. She was young and healthy, but I noticed as soon as our neighbor moved in, right next door to us, her health started declining rapidly. I was not going to allow my pet bird to die like that. One day, I opened the balcony doors and reached out with my pet bird on my right hand, trying to tell her to go ahead and fly away. She turned her head backwards and looked at me for a few seconds. I know she was trying to tell me thank you for letting me go free and to be careful. Even though animals can't really talk, I do believe they know a lot more than we think. She then jumped off my hand and flew off into the sunlight. But everything boiled over one night at about 4 o'clock in the morning as I was sleeping with my wife, when suddenly I awoken by a sharp, excruciating pain that I've never experienced before. It felt as if sharp pins were stuck in my back, and my muscles were restless all up and down my neck to my back. I could not keep still. I jumped off the bed, and I remember pacing back and forth from the end of the room to the other side. I told my wife that something was wrong with my back and that I couldn't take the pain. The whole time she was telling me to calm down and to lay down so that she could try rubbing my back. But the pain was too great for me to lay down. The bedroom lights were still completely off, and it was pitch dark in the room except for the moonlight coming through our balcony door window. As I was pacing back and forth, what I then saw shocked me to the core. It was a person's shadow seeping through the balcony window. I stopped moving. I then slowly crept up to the window blinds on the door and pulled them down. There stood my neighbor with her nose practically touching the wall facing my bedroom. Her head was down and her arms were spread apart with her palms upright. She was praying or chanting something. Her eyes were closed. I quickly told my wife to quietly witness what I was seeing. She also saw the woman. I quickly called the police to try and get her in trouble. I did not want to even talk to such a person. I was disgusted with what she was doing. I was also very pissed off because I knew my pain was coming from what she was doing. As soon as I saw a huge flashlight light up our balcony, going from left to right, I knew the police were out there. I looked at the witch, and she was still on the balcony, wearing a white sleeping gown. She was looking down, staring right at the cop as he flashed the light towards her. She was hiding in the corner, but there was no way the cop didn't see her. For some reason, he then left. I was extremely upset and baffled as to how the witch didn't get caught. I knew it was because she was into the cult, and that's what probably helped her. At that point, the pain in my back completely vanished. I was still in disbelief as to what had just occurred. Not even 2 weeks after that incident, thankfully, she moved out. The moral of this true story is, please be careful who you live next to. It just might be a witch.